Let us now continue our class on the Surangama Sutra, and currently we are making analysis of the 7 great elements, which includes the elements of the earth, water, fire, wind, space, and then the consciousness and view. Within which we have already covered on the earth element, the fire element, the water element, and today we are going to make the analysis of the wind element as well as the space element. Let's continue to look at the actual text, the sutra. The Buddha then told Ananda, saying that Ananda, by nature, the wind has no substance. Each of the elements, we need to make the analysis of its nature. Either the nature is certain or not certain. What is the nature of the wind then? In fact, it is without substance. It is not solidly existent, just like the previous elements. The nature of the wind is, in fact, of constant movement and stillness, and it is impermanent. We know how wind works. It is all of a sudden there's wind, and then even during the grazely wind, there could be peacefulness that comes from nowhere. So that is the nature of wind. There is no substance to it. There is no constant nature to it. It is of movement and stillness, but such movement and stillness are impermanent. And then the Buddha continued to give Ananda examples to demonstrate what the nature of wind is. After studying Surangama Sutra, I think we would be able to understand more of the logical analysis from the Buddhist logic. On top of that, the Buddha made different angles of observation of the 12 ayatanas and 6 entrances and the 5 aggregates. And each of them are described and analyzed from different angles. Previously, after we studied the Medium Agama Sutra and the Miscellaneous Agama Sutra, or including the Prajna Paramita Sutra, usually the analyses are very similar to one another. And then later on, after one specific analysis, the next ones would say that so that analysis or that logic would apply to the form, sound, smell, touch, and so on. But it seems that Surangama Sutra is very different. Surangama Sutra analyzes each of the questions from a very different angle. Over here, the Buddha gives an example to Ananda, saying that you always adjust your robe as you enter the great assembly. When the corner of your samgati brushes the person next to you, there is a slight breeze which stirs against that person's face. Ananda, whenever he enters into the Sangha, he would adjust his attire. I think it applies to us as well. Whenever we attend any Dharma assembly or whenever we go to the shrine hall to listen to class, we need to straighten up our clothes so that we would look proper in our robes. And then, in such a way, people will not generate wrong views or slander you. The worldly people are also like such. They would dress appropriate attire to different situations, and they would straighten up their clothing before entering into a large assembly. I think majority of our Sangha here, the monastics, are doing much better than years ago. The lay practitioners should dress like a lay practitioner. Previously, I've addressed that there are a few numbers of our lay practitioners where their hair too short. And in such a way, you don't look like a lay practitioner nor a monastic, because the clothing that you wear is not a monastic, but the hair is just too short. Over here, Ananda, when he enters into assembly, he simply would adjust these robes. And Samgati over here means it's the general name for Kashaya, the monastic robe. In fact, there are a few different types, the ones with 3 pieces, with 5 pieces, and with 7 pieces. The clothing, the robes of the Buddha, we would call them as Kashaya. Before the Buddha made the Vinaya and precepts for people to dress Kashayas in certain ways, in fact, there were no rules for what monastics should wear. But maybe because the winter time in India is still a bit cold, and then the bhikshus would stay at certain of the donors' places, and then they would wear different kinds of clothing at different places, and then the Buddha felt that those types of dresses doesn't look very dignified. Therefore, he made the particular types of clothes that the monastics should wear. But at that time, according to Vinaya, in fact, there is no description of the monastic scarf, rather only the different types of monastic robes. Anyhow, over here, the Buddha said that, Ananda, when you are about to enter into the great assembly, and at the time of adjusting your robe, the corner of your Samgati may touch other people's face or touch other people. At that time, is it because of the movement of your clothes? Because the movement of your clothes, then a breeze would swift over other people's face. So the breeze that's brought forth by the movement of the clothing. Now, this breeze, where does it come from? Does this wind come from the corner of the Kashaya, or does it arise from emptiness, or is it produced from the face of the person brushed by the wind? Where does it come from? And then the Buddha would continue to analyze the 3 aspects. It seems that in each of the elements there are the 3 aspects, but the angles are very different. Now, Ananda, if the wind comes from the corner of the Kashaya, you are then clad in the wind, and your Kashaya should fly about and leave your body. Since there is wind, since the wind comes from the corner of your Kashaya, then you're not wearing a robe, you're wearing wind. Because if wind comes from Kashaya, you are simply wearing the wind instead of clothing. Once you wear wind, your clothes would naturally be blown away or be moved away or be blown away. So you will not able to wear clothes on your body since you're wearing wind, which would blow away whatever clothing you would put on your body. In this way, Ananda,
真理或者说是别人这样的话，那就可能是身体都没有衣服了，没有衣服的话，
you are really not wearing any clothing
身上有披上风的话，那就是衣服
you're wearing wind, and wind would blow away your clothes. Therefore, you're not wearing clothes. But that is definitely false. It is not like such at all. And then the Buddha continued to say that I'm not speaking Dharma in the midst of the assembly, and my robe remains motionless and hands straight down. Ananda, you should look closely at my robe to see whether there is any wind in it. Ananda said that I'm giving you Dharma teachings among this large assembly, so everyone, you should look at my clothing right now, and Ananda, especially you, look at my clothing. Is there wind? Am I wearing wind or am I wearing monastic robe? I definitely am wearing clothes, right? You should look closely at my robe to see whether there is any wind in it. Am I hiding some wind inside my robe? So that if I were to let loose of my robe or lift up my robe, the wind would blow to other people's face. Is that the case? Since the kashaya is not wind, how could it bring wind? It cannot be that wind. It cannot be that the wind is stored somewhere in the robe either. So it is neither from kashaya. The wind neither comes from kashaya nor stored and hidden somewhere in the kashaya either. Then the third aspect, if it arose from emptiness, from the space, this is the third aspect, right? Why wouldn't the wind brush against the man even when your robe didn't move? If the wind were to be generated and arose from space, at the time of your clothing not moving, then the person who's still staying in space, why doesn't the wind blow to that person's face? Because previously, you simply moved the corner of your clothing, which created a little breeze. We feel that often. But if this breeze were to come from space, then when your clothing is not moving, there should still be wind blowing to that person's face. But why doesn't it? Therefore, that is incorrect. In the sutra, it says that emptiness is constant in nature since it is unconditioned. Thus, the wind should constantly arise as well. Since you were to say that if you think that the wind arises from emptiness, then since the space is constant in nature, the wind should also be constantly arise, constantly be there. To give you an example, in our shrine hall, since it is filled with space, let us be here or not be here, there would be a constant wind going on in our shrine hall. It doesn't matter if we have clothing or not clothing, with the windows open or without the windows open, it doesn't matter, because as long as there is space, there should be wind, according to what you said. Also, since Since you said at the time of without wind, then the space should also disappear. It should also cease. Since you said that the emptiness is constant in nature and then the wind arises from space. One stays, therefore the other one would also arise. That's their relationship. It is just to say that if the Father existed, then the Son would also. But if the Father doesn't exist, how could the Son exist? Similarly, over here it says that you can perceive the disappearance of the wind. This is possible. We often would say that the wind is quiet and the waves are gone. So we say that. But what would the disappearance of emptiness looks like? There would be no way of perceive the disappearance of space. That would be very difficult to explain. If it did arise and disappear, it could not be what is called emptiness. Since it is what is called emptiness, how can it generate wind? If emptiness would disappear, then how could it be space anymore? Because space is constant. Since space is empty, it is emptiness, it is space, that's the nature of it, that's the characteristic of it. Then out of this emptiness, how could there be wind? How can it generate wind? So there is no way to have any evidence to prove it. And then the third one says that if the wind were to come from the face of that person, if the wind came from the face of the person by your side, that is not reasonable at all. How could it be? It would blow up on you while you set your robe in order. Why would it blow backwards up on the person from whom it was generated? The wind, the direction of the wind would be blowing from that person's face to Ananda rather than from Ananda's robe to that person's face. It seems that the Tathagata would be able to explain one thing from many different angles, even if it's something that's very simple. So his way of explaining things are definitely very subtle and profound. So previously was the problem that's associated with the wind coming from the face of the other person. And then, upon closer examination, you will find that the robe is set in order by yourself. The face blown by wind belongs to the person by your side. And the emptiness is tranquil and not involved in movement. So when you were tidying up and straightening up your clothing, why would the wind of the other person blow onto your face? That doesn't make any sense. Because first of all, it was you who were straightening up your clothing. And second of all, if the wind were to come from his face, then the wind would be blowing towards your direction instead of blowing towards himself. That is not reasonable either. The direction would be incorrect. That's definitely wrong. Making observation from such a way, we would feel that we really don't usually analyze the wind. Sometimes we feel that, oh, this is the wind that's coming towards me, such as whenever we open up the window or whenever other people straightening up their clothing, there would be wind or breeze that's blown onto your body. But we had never really made observation in such a way to examine where the wind comes from. And then the Buddha continued to say that make a closer examination. You will find the robe is set in order by itself, the face blown by the wind belongs to the person by your side, and the emptiness is tranquil and not involved in movement. These are the three aspects that you need to make the observation. So the first aspect is that the wind blow onto others' face, and the face is the others, and the wind is tranquil. The emptiness, the space itself is without any movement. The space is tranquil and is not involved with movement. So from the three aspects, your clothing, other people's face, and the space, you cannot mix and unite them together. In this way, where then does the wind come from that blow in this place? If we were to make observation following the method that the Buddha taught us, following the wisdom of the Buddha, you will notice that many things in this world are like such. All phenomena in this world can be observed in such a way. In the sutra, it says that wind and emptiness cannot mix and unite since they are different from each other. They're different entities. The nature of the two, the wind and emptiness, are different. If they are completely different in its nature and entity, then how could they mix and unite? Previously, Ananda asked, well, isn't everything produced from the uniting and mixing of causes and conditions? So over here, the Buddha said that, well, since the wind and emptiness cannot be mixed and united because they are different from each other, they're different entities and have different natures. We could say that the causes and the conditions could make production. However, even if we're not talking about the other five great elements, even if we're just looking at the element of space and then the element of wind, they're completely different because one is with movement and the other one is without movement. One is with production and cessation and the other one is without production and cessation. How could these two, which are completely different entities and different things, to be mixed and united? Usually we can say in a conventional way that everything arises from causes and conditions, but the Buddha over here in this sutra specifically talked about the phenomena is not a reason because of causes and conditions and not from spontaneity either. And that statement is from a deep examination. It is simply just a dreamlike conditions and causes that's maturing, which makes such kind of dreamlike production as well. But when you truly to make the observation, there is no production. And then in the sutra, the Buddha continued to say that you still do not know that in the treasury of the thus come one, the nature of wind is true emptiness, and the nature of emptiness is true wind. Pure at its origin, it pervades the Dharma realm. It seems that Ananda is getting more and more confused at this point. It seems that I shouldn't badmouth Ananda. The Buddha said that, well, you still do not know that in the treasury of the thus come one, the nature of wind is true emptiness. The wind is indeed the true emptiness, and then the nature of emptiness is true wind, pure at its origin. It is with the nature of emptiness and the nature of luminosity, and it pervades all of the Dharma Dhatu. This particular teaching is it well understood by the sentient beings of the 10 Dharma Dhatus? On top of the 6 realms of beings, there's also the Shravakas, Pradika Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and the Buddhas all together. That's the 10 sentient beings, 10 types of sentient beings of Dharma Dhatu. The different kinds of wind, based on the different karma and different mind of the sentient beings, would be completely different. The wind to the Shravakas and wind to the Bodhisattvas, wind to the mundane beings, and wind to the beings of the 6 realms would be completely different. When we are enjoying some nice breeze, our experience could be different. If we have good practice at that moment, good insight, we would feel that this particular breeze is very comfortable. It must be the blessings from the 3 jewels. When we do not have a good mood at that moment of having the wind blown through us or blown around us, we would feel that, oh, it's a terrible wind and it's horrible, or the wind to the Ashuras and to the hell realm beings are completely different. That is because it accords with the living being's mind in response to their capacity to know. To continue in the sutra, Ananda, in the same way that you as one person move your robe slightly, just because you slightly moved your robe, Ananda, and then there's a small wind arises. After that wind arises, this wind in fact has already arisen in all countries if there's a similar movement throughout the Dharma realm. This wind is all pervasive throughout the Dharma Dhatu and all the countries. If we were to also use this robe and make a slight movement, it could also make the person beside you to feel this small breeze as well. Wherever and whomsoever moves your clothing like this, then you would definitely be able to create a small wind. In Asia, in Africa, in whichever place you are in the world, you would be able to create a small wind in this way. So what does it mean? It means that it can produce, this wind can be produced throughout the world, since it is within the nature of the Buddha nature. Since Buddha nature has already contained this 4 great elements nature, and it is all pervasive throughout the Dharma Dhatu. Since it can be produced throughout the world, how can there be any fixed place to which it is confined? It is experienced to whatever extent is dictated by the law of karma. Indeed, it is because of our very different karma we would be able to see the different wind. According to some of the commentary, it says that out of all the powers, the power of wind is the greatest. Indeed, the wind carries a great role in our animate and inanimate world. Without wind, then there would be no movement of thoughts, no movement of our physical body. We do need wind. Our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body also needs wind, relies on the wind to have movements. Also in the world, let it be the difference of the seasons changes or the differences of the different beings in different realms, all the way between hell realm to the pure world, to the pure land, Sukhavati or Shambhala. Wind is something that we cannot live without. Wind is so important to us. In summer, we don't have ghastly wind, but we have lots of wind in winter. I heard today there was a tornado In Zhejiang or some area around the southern part of China, about thousands of people were attacked by this tornado. There was quite a catastrophe. Indeed, wind sometimes could bring about happiness, especially the cool breeze in summer, or sometimes would bring about great suffering. I remember that back in 2018, I was in Hong Kong at the time when Typhoon Mangkhut hit Hong Kong. There was a catastrophic damage made by the typhoon. The windows of all the high-risers, many of them were completely broken because of the hit of the typhoon. At the time when Typhoon Mangkhut hit Hong Kong, I was riding in a car on the highway, and I was quite afraid that the car would be blown to the bottom of the highway by the typhoon, because there were lots of shakes and moves. But the driver said, "Oh, don't worry, it's fine." So we can see that wind indeed sometimes could bring about catastrophe and sometimes could bring about bliss. In our world without wind, and in our body, if we don't have wind, our body would rotten, and in our world without wind, our world would also be damaged. So we know that the power of wind is great, and it is all pervasive. It is just that we do not recognize it. The Buddha said that ignorant of this fact, people in the world are so deluded as to assign their origin to cause and conditions, or to spontaneity. These mistakes, which arise from the discriminations and reasoning process of the conscious mind, are nothing but the play of empty words which bear no real meaning. The nature of wind, in fact, is the treasure of the thus come one. The nature of wind is empty. We need to know that the true nature of wind is emptiness, and true emptiness is true wind. This is quite an important one to remember. Another one is that it accords with the living beings' minds in response to their capacity to know. This is another really important verse. Another one is that it is experienced to whatever extent is dictated by the law of karma. So these three are extremely important. If we can't memorize all the teachings in the Surangama Sutra, at least we should be able to memorize some parts of it, or some very short stanzas in which that could bring us a great insights. I remember that when I was little and when I was still herding yaks, I would herd the yaks in wind at all times, and sometimes I feel that it would be the best to have a place to hide from the wind. Eventually, I found a I took refuge in a small cave. It was a very little cave. When I came out from that cave, there were some people around there, and because I was really little when I was at that age, since there were a few of the adults standing outside and saw me coming out from a tiny cave, and he said that, "Is it a person or is that a rabbit?" And then in the next part in the sutra, it says that Ananda, the nature of emptiness has no shape. We can also make analysis of emptiness of space. In fact, emptiness doesn't have any form. It is the emptiness is only apparent because of form. It is to say, if, for example, you have a container that it takes the shape of a square of a box, then within that we can say that the space is of the shape of a box. If our house is of a sphere, then we could describe the space as spherical as well. So the space can only be described, or it is only apparent because of form. And then the Buddha continued to tell such an example. For instance, Shravasti is far from the river, so when the Kshatriyas, Brahmins, Vaishyas, Shudras, Bharadvajas, Chandalas, and so forth built their home there, they dig wells seeking water. In the city Shravasti, since there are places that's still far from the river, so when there are the Kshatriyas, so the kings, and then the Brahmins, the priests. The priests, according to the caste system, they are of the most noble ones, because it is said that they were born from the mouth of the Brahma. Therefore, they say that they are the descendants of the Brahma. Therefore, they're considered as the most noble. And then Vaishyas, we also talked about that as well. The Vaishyas are the merchants. We talked about that in the wish-fulfilling treasury. Also, Shudras. Shudras, according to the commentary of the fingers and palms, it says that they are the farmers. And then Bharadvajas, the technicians, or the craftsmen. Also, Chandalas, the lowest of the caste, usually the ones who takes the job of killing the other beings, the other sentient beings, and they would feel that by taking up the vicious deeds, activities, could dignify themselves, such as killing animals, or even killing people. Chandalas are usually not very much respected in India. Also, one of the signs they have is to hold a bell, and sometimes whenever they walk by, there are sounds of the bell. Also, if they do not have any bells, they would hold some bamboos or some sticks to make some sounds while they walk. Therefore, when the Chandalas are walking by, the other noble people do not want to get close to them or touch them at all. So over here, the example is that in the city Shravasti, which is far away from the riverbank, for that reason, this group of people who live in the city Shravasti would start to make a well. While building it, where a foot of earth is removed, there is a foot of emptiness. Since the different people from different castes are digging to make a well, to build a well, they would keep digging so that the well would be built. Unlike nowadays, we have machines that does this kind of work. Over here, the example is that while they're digging the well, a foot of earth is removed from the earth, where then a foot of emptiness would be there in the well. Now, 1 foot is about 33 centimeters, and 10 feet is about 3 meters.
10米是1丈。啊？对，10尺1丈嘛。
Kempo over here uses a different measuring system. That's a Chinese measurement, which is slightly longer than 10 feet. It's about 3.33 meters.
对，你说的对，厉害，好厉害，这么深的数学。
You're very good at math. Since 1 foot is about 3.33 centimeters, so you're good at getting the result of 3.33 meters. Let's look at the sutra over here where a foot of earth is removed, there is a foot of emptiness. Whereas many as 10 feet of earth are removed, there are 10 feet of emptiness. The more earth you dig out from the well, then the more space. This really reminded me of groundhogs that we have in Sirta. All the groundhogs works very hard in digging holes. Other than groundhog, there are small birds actually would also dig holes and live in the ground as well. At the beginning of the institute, since we didn't have lots of provisions, so we didn't have enough infrastructures to use and didn't have enough place to live, so there were practitioners who would just make a cave inside the ground to live. And then the Buddha posed the question, the depth of emptiness corresponds to the amount of earth removed. So here's the question. Does this emptiness come out of the dirt? Does it exist because of the digging, or does it arise of itself without a cause? After digging out those earth, in the past it was by the man force, but now it's by machines. So, Ananda, does this emptiness come out of the dirt, or because of the action of digging, or does it arise of itself without a cause? These are the three questions. Moreover, Ananda, suppose this emptiness arose of itself without any cause. Then what's the point of digging, or what's the point of removing this earth at all, since emptiness arose of itself without any cause? Why wasn't it unobstructed before the earth was dug? Why wasn't it unobstructed? How could the space be obstructed or were unseen at that time? How would you be able to see the space after you finish digging out the earth? The earth, if it arose of itself without any cause, then how could you not be able to see it earlier? Let it be 1 foot or 10 feet. Nobody saw that. Quite the contrary, one saw only the great earth at that time, but there was no emptiness evident in it before digging. It is only during the time of digging we saw the space. If emptiness came about because of the removal of earth, we should have seen it entering the well as the earth was removed. By the time we take the earth out, we should be able to see how the space would be poured into that part of the well. Just like when after class a group of people would then get out of the shrine hall. According to the commentary, it says that the space must have a character, must have a form in such a way it could be able to enter. Otherwise, if there's a space, how would you be able to see that how it enters? Now, after you finish digging the earth out, and the space should have a character, then the space that has this kind of form should be able to enter into it. If there is no going in or coming out, then there is no difference between the earth and emptiness. Why then doesn't emptiness come out of the well along with the earth in the process of digging? If there is no coming in or out of the space, then there is no difference between the earth and emptiness. What's the difference of them? Since you said that at first you said that it came from the earth, but you do not see the space entering back, then you're saying that the earth and the emptiness are the same. If you're to say that they are the same, then you're saying that they are no difference, they are of the same entity. The emptiness is the earth. Why then doesn't emptiness come out of the well along with the earth in the process of digging? Well, in this way, if you're saying that the earth and the emptiness are the same, then after you're digging out the earth, the space should also be dug out. Isn't that interesting? Isn't this particular way of analysis interesting? I think sometimes we can also use the way of debating as well. Sometimes I notice the Sangha member over here do not follow the methods of observation, rather use your own imagination. Some of the imagination can be creative and some are not quite reasonable. This is the second observation. Now, the third one, if emptiness appeared because of digging, if you were to say that it's because of the process of digging, because of such, emptiness appeared. Then you're saying that instead of digging out of earth, you're digging out of emptiness, then the digging would bring out emptiness instead of earth. If emptiness does not come out because of digging, then the digging yields only earth. Why then do we see emptiness appear as the well is dug? If you were to say that I am simply digging out of earth, but then how would you be able to see in this well? You can already see this 1 foot of hollowed in hole in the ground. You can still see space over there. If you were to say that, oh no, I was simply digging out of earth, then why do we see emptiness appear as the well is dug? I think it's a little bit difficult for those of you who never studied Buddhist logic, but if you can open up your mind, then you would be able to understand. The Buddha said that you should consider this even more carefully. The Buddha said that I will think even more carefully, look into it deeply, and you will find the digging comes from the person's hand as its means of convenience, and the earth exists because of a change in the ground. But what causes the emptiness to appear? In fact, the digging comes from our hands, or the man's hands when he's digging, and then there's the conveyance, the change of transportation of those earth, moving those earth from inside the ground to the outside of the ground and move them into some other place. For example, currently we are maintaining the road, we're mending the road, and while we're doing that, we dug out a hole and put a pipe in there. So while the center part is empty, we would move the earth to a different place. Over here, the Buddha said that since it's the man's hands who are holding the tools and digging the earth out of the earth out of the ground, and then move them to a different place. In such a way, where does the space come from? What causes the emptiness to appear? Also, the digging and emptiness, one being substantial and the other one insubstantial. The digging is substantial. It has an actual action, but the space is insubstantial. It's just like the child of a barren woman. How could these two be mixed and united? Therefore, they do not mix and unite together. When we say that earth, water, fire, wind, and space, what are the causes and conditions for them? On one hand, we could talk about that from the causes and conditions point of view, but that is when you have not closely examined the nature of such. But after you make the examination, then you will realize that the elements are not truly existent. It is just like when it comes to the space and earth, and then the space as well as the digging, these two or these four cannot be mixed and united together. These kinds of causes and conditions cannot be mixed and united. They're simply delusion. They're simply illusory. They're just like a dream and just like an illusion. How could a digging, which is substantial, be united and mixed to space, which is insubstantial? That is why the Buddha said that it is not with cause and condition and not arise from spontaneity, nor can it be that a space exists spontaneously without an origin. You cannot say that it is without a cause, because without a cause, no phenomena can be produced. Although the nature of emptiness is completely pervasive, it is basically unmoving. Sometimes it may seem that the space changes from one place to another. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it doesn't. But in the nature, it has never moved at all. You should know that it and earth, water, fire, and wind are together called the five elements. Why would we call the space as the element of space? In some commentaries, it is called the great element of space. It's because it is all-pervasive and without movement. Its nature and the space itself would be all-pervasive without any movement. The other four elements, the earth, water, fire, and wind, do they all have such kind of nature of pervasiveness and unmoving? Yes, they do as well. That is why it is called the five great elements. Their natures are true and perfectly fused, and all are the treasury of the thus come one, fundamentally devoid of production and extinction. In its nature, it is without any production and extinction. The Surangama Sutra has fused the third turning of the Dharma wheel, second turning of Dharma wheel, and the first turning of Dharma wheel. It talks about the causes and conditions, which is taught in the first turning of the Dharma wheel, and it talks about the emptiness, which is taught in the second turning of the Dharma wheel, and then the luminosity aspect of the Buddha nature that's taught in the third turning of the Dharma wheel. And then the Buddha told Ananda, saying that Ananda, your mind is murky and confused. Ananda, you're so confused that therefore you do not understand, and you do not awaken to the fact that the source of the four elements is none other than the treasury of the thus come one. Why do you not take a look at emptiness to see whether it is subject to such relativity as coming and going? Now look at it. Is it coming? Is it going? Is it neither coming nor going? According to the commentary of Fingers and Palm, it says that if it is with coming and going, without coming and going, with coming and is coming and is going, then it is part of the causes and conditions. If you were to say that the space is not part of entering or going, then you're saying that it is part of spontaneity. But the true space, the coming and going, not coming or not going, in fact, it is because you do not know its true nature. You're talking about this because you do not know the true nature. So over here it says that you do not know at all that in the treasury of the thus come one, the nature of enlightenment is true emptiness, and the nature of emptiness is true enlightenment. The nature of enlightenment is true emptiness. Pure at its origin, it pervades the Dharma realm. It actually accords with the living being's mind in response to their capacity to know. The space, in fact, is perceivable in this world by all of us. There are people, by relying on this space, created lots of virtuous deeds, and some created lots of vicious deeds. Some, based on those deeds, brought about a great amount of happiness, and some brought forth a great amount of suffering. Some said that it would be good to keep your windows open, to keep a little bit of space of the window so that you would have some oxygen to come into your room. That would be really healthy. And some said, no, you shouldn't keep your window open at night because the wind at night is poisonous. If it enters into your body, you would definitely get a cold. So people would say all kinds of things. Let's look at the space inside the room. Could bring happiness to some and could bring suffering to some others. That's very different, and it is basically because such kind of happiness and suffering is brought forth according to the living beings' minds and in response to their capacity to know and in their different karma as well. Ananda, if in one place there is a well empty of earth, there will be emptiness filling up that one place. Whatever space that you are looking at right now, let it be a little hotel room or inside your own room, this space created your world and is your world at this moment. And the Buddha continued to say that if there are wells empty of earth in the 10 directions, there will be emptiness filling them up in the 10 directions. Sometimes when I look at the ants and how they are building their nests, I would think that look at how the ants work so hard to build their own homes and living in a completely different kind of space. That's exactly the same as the space that we live in, the homes that we live in. We don't even need to look at all the great teachings of impermanence given by the wonderful masters such as Patrul Rinpoche when he talks about impermanence. But our current residence, our homes, and our magnificent shrine hall is just like the nest of of the ants. So it is quite impermanent, and therefore we need to rely on this space to create virtuous deeds. At least we're over here studying the great Mahayana teachings. And the Buddha continued to say that since it fills up the 10 directions, is there any fixed location in which emptiness is found? When we look at the space, each of us, we have a different space. Let it be inside Larungar or not. The space is all pervasive. By relying on the space, can you bring forth happiness or suffering? That's completely based on your karma. It's completely up to you. Some would say that if I were to leave Larungar, what should I do? Where can I go? I don't know what to do anymore. In fact, you can live anywhere in the 4 directions or 10 directions. There's space anywhere. As long as we have the virtuous karma, then it should be fine. It is experienced to whatever extent is dictated by the law of karma. Ignorant of this fact, the people in the world are so deluded as to assign their origin to cause and to causes and conditions or to spontaneity. These mistakes, which arise from the discrimination and reasoning process of the conscious mind, are nothing but the play of empty words which bear no real meanings. This time, by making analysis of the great elements, definitely helps us to understand this world, this Buddha nature, and understand how the karma plays the parts in the Buddha nature. The connection of the two, I think it definitely brought forth different types of understanding. Though it is not a piece of instruction that is the same as the Vajrayana, but the way it is explained could definitely bring forth a great amount of faith and certainty in understanding of the Buddha's teaching. So let's stop here today.